The carved stone beneath Maya's palm felt alive, not just warm, but pulsing with a steady rhythm that matched her own heartbeat. She jerked her hand away, but the baby inside her continued its frantic movements, pressing against her ribs as if trying to reach toward the mantelpiece. "Easy there, little one," she whispered, rubbing her belly through her worn wool coat. 8 months along, and the child had never been this active. Dr. Reeves, back in Seattle, had warned her that stress could affect the pregnancy, but what choice did she have? The eviction notice had given her 3 days, and those 3 days had stretched into a cross-country drive in her dying Honda, chasing a lead about Marcus that had brought her to this frozen wasteland of a town. The Hobbit house, she couldn't think of it any other way, defied everything she knew about abandoned buildings. No broken windows, no musty smell of decay, no signs of rodent infestation. Instead, the air carried a faint metallic scent that reminded her of the deep ocean research stations where she'd once spent months cataloging bioluminescent species. The main room curved in a perfect circle, its walls constructed from smooth river stones fitted together without mortar. Overhead, exposed wooden beams formed a spiral pattern that drew her eye toward the center, where a copper fixture hung dark and silent. Maya shrugged off her backpack and set it beside a low wooden table that looked handcrafted, its surface worn smooth by decades of use. Everything in the house had that same quality, furniture that seemed grown rather than built, organic shapes that followed no blueprint she could recognize. A kitchen alcove nestled into the far wall, its copper pipes green with patina, but somehow still functional. She'd tested the faucet when she first entered, expecting nothing, but clear water had flowed freely despite the house being disconnected from the town's utilities. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, though she hadn't lit it. That should have terrified her, but exhaustion had worn her fear down to a dull wariness. She'd been living on adrenaline and truck stop coffee for 3 days, ever since the private investigator in Seattle had called with news about Marcus's research partner. Dr. Elena Vasquez had disappeared from Grim Hollow in 1979, the same year Marcus claimed their deep-sea genetics project had been shut down. The same year this house had apparently been abandoned. Maya sank into an armchair positioned near the fire, its leather upholstery cracked but still comfortable. The baby settled as soon as she sat down, as if finally content. Through the round window beside the mantelpiece, she could see the blizzard raging across the hillside, snow whipping horizontally in the wind. The town of Grim Hollow lay somewhere below, its lights invisible through the storm. She'd found 3 people willing to talk about the Hobbit house during her brief visit to the town's only diner that afternoon. The waitress, a weathered woman named Dolores, had crossed herself and muttered something about cursed ground. The man at the counter had laughed and called it a hippie commune house from the 70s. But it was the third person, an elderly miner named Frank Kowalski, who'd made her skin crawl. He'd leaned close and whispered that the house chose its occupants, that it had been waiting 40 years for the right person to come along. "Course, that's just old folklore," he'd added with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "You ain't thinking of staying there, are you, miss?" She hadn't been thinking of it then. Her plan had been to ask questions, follow the trail that might lead her to Marcus, and figure out why he'd abandoned her and their unborn child without a word. But when the storm had hit and her car had died on the mountain road, the Hobbit house had been the only shelter for miles. Now, as the fire cast dancing shadows on the curved walls, Maya noticed details she'd missed in her initial desperation. The stones weren't just fitted together. They were carved with intricate patterns that seemed to flow from one to the next, creating an endless spiral that made her dizzy if she followed it too long. Some of the carvings looked almost like microscopic organisms, the kind she'd studied under powerful electron microscopes. Others resembled star charts or maybe molecular diagrams. Her laptop bag sat unopened beside her chair, containing the only copies of Marcus's research notes she'd been able to salvage from their shared apartment. She'd read them so many times she could recite passages from memory, but now she wondered if she'd been missing something crucial. The project had involved genetic adaptation in extreme environments, specifically how deep-sea creatures had evolved to survive in crushing darkness and pressure. The baby kicked again, a gentle nudge this time, and Maya felt her eyelids growing heavy. The warmth from the fireplace, the comfortable chair, the strange sense of safety despite being stranded in a storm, it all conspired to pull her toward sleep. As consciousness slipped away, she thought she heard something impossible, a low humming that seemed to come from the walls themselves, harmonizing with her own breathing and the steady rhythm of her heart. Maya startled awake to pale morning light filtering through frost-covered windows. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. The curved walls and organic architecture belonged to no world she recognized. Then reality crashed back. The storm, the broken-down Honda, the impossible warmth of this place that had no right to exist. The fire had died to glowing embers, yet the house remained comfortable despite the Arctic wind still howling outside. She pressed her palms against her lower back and stretched, expecting the familiar ache of sleeping in a chair. Instead, she felt remarkably rested, more refreshed than she'd been in months. The baby lay quiet inside her, a peaceful weight that made her smile despite everything. Her phone had no signal, but the timestamp read 7:23 a.m. Back in Seattle, she would have been rushing to catch the bus to the Marine Research Facility, balancing a travel mug of coffee and her laptop bag while navigating the morning crowds. Dr. Patricia Wells would be expecting her weekly report on the bioluminescence project, work that felt like a lifetime ago now, though it had only been 3 weeks since she'd packed up her desk and fled across the country. Maya pulled out her laptop and opened the folder labeled Marcus, Research Notes. The familiar pages of equations and diagrams filled the screen, but this morning they struck her differently. Sitting in this house with its microscopic wall carvings, the genetic sequences looked less like academic theory and more like a blueprint for something specific, something alive. She scrolled to a passage she'd read dozens of times. The specimens from the Mariana Trench exhibit unprecedented adaptive capabilities. Cell division rates increase exponentially when exposed to specific harmonic frequencies. Dr. Vasquez believes we may have discovered a form of controlled evolution, organisms that can reshape themselves based on environmental demands. Elena Vasquez, the woman who disappeared from Grimhallow the same year this house was abandoned. Maya had spent months trying to contact Marcus's former research partner, leaving voicemails and sending emails that went unanswered. It wasn't until the private investigator had mentioned Grimhallow that she'd even known where to look. The baby shifted, pressing against her ribs in a way that felt almost purposeful. Maya rubbed the spot absently while reading, a habit she'd developed during the long nights when sleep wouldn't come. Before Marcus had vanished, he used to talk to the baby every evening, placing his hands on her belly and describing his latest discoveries in the same gentle tone other fathers might use for bedtime stories. "Your daddy's brilliant," he'd whisper. "He's going to change the world, and you're going to be part of something amazing." She'd loved those moments. The three of them connected in their small apartment overlooking Elliott Bay, planning a future that seemed limitless. Marcus had talked about opening his own research facility, maybe somewhere remote where they could raise their child surrounded by nature instead of city concrete. They'd even looked at properties online, rural houses with acreage and good internet connections. Maya closed the laptop and walked to the round window. The storm had passed, leaving Grimhallow buried under 3 feet of fresh snow. From this height, the town looked like a toy village nestled between the mountains, its few dozen buildings connected by roads that disappeared under white drifts. Smoke rose from several chimneys, and she could see tiny figures already moving about, beginning the work of digging out. She needed to get down there, find a mechanic who could fix her car, or at least a way to contact the outside world. Dr. Wells would be worried if Maya missed their Monday check-in call, and there were bills to pay, decisions to make about the baby's delivery. Her savings account was nearly empty, and the health insurance from her old job would run out in 6 weeks. But standing in the curved embrace of the Hobbit house, those concerns felt distant and abstract. Here, surrounded by walls that seemed to pulse with their own quiet life, she could almost imagine staying. The kitchen had running water and a gas stove that worked perfectly despite the house's apparent abandonment. The bedroom alcove she'd discovered last night contained a comfortable bed and even some women's clothing in sizes that would fit her changing body, as if the house had been waiting for someone exactly like her. The thought should have been disturbing, but instead Maya felt a strange sense of homecoming. For the first time since Marcus's disappearance, she wasn't constantly looking over her shoulder or jumping at unexpected sounds. The baby had settled into the same peaceful rhythm, no longer the restless, anxious presence that had kept her awake for weeks. Outside, a truck wound its way up the mountain road, probably coming to check on her after the storm. Soon she'd have to return to the ordinary world of phone calls and responsibilities, insurance forms and prenatal appointments. But for now, she could pretend that this impossible house might offer something better than the uncertain future waiting for her in Seattle. The baby kicked gently, and Maya could have sworn she felt an answering vibration from the walls themselves, as if the house was welcoming them both home. The truck's engine grew louder as it climbed the winding road, its snow chains clanking against the asphalt in a steady rhythm. Maya watched from the round window as a battered Ford pickup crested the final hill, its headlights cutting through the morning glare off the snow. She recognized the vehicle from yesterday's brief visit to town. It belonged to Frank Kowalski, the elderly miner who'd warned her about the house choosing its occupants. She should have felt relieved. Here was her rescue, her path back to the rational world where houses didn't hum and walls didn't pulse with mysterious energy. But instead, Maya found herself backing away from the window, her hands instinctively protective over her belly. The baby had gone completely still, as if sensing her sudden tension. The truck pulled to a stop beside her disabled Honda, and Frank climbed out with surprising agility for a man who had to be pushing 70. He wore the same heavy work coat from yesterday, but now Maya noticed the deliberate way he moved, how his eyes swept the area before settling on the Hobbit house. This wasn't a casual welfare check. Maya's laptop chimed with an incoming email. Impossible, since her phone showed no signal bars. The Wi-Fi icon glowed green in the corner of her screen, connected to a network called Hearthstone. She stared at the screen, her mind struggling to process this new impossibility. The house had internet access? After 40 years of abandonment? The email was from an address she didn't recognize, e.vasquez.research@hearthstone.net. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Marcus's missing research partner. Maya's hands trembled as she clicked it open. Maya Chen, I've been waiting for you to find this place. The house has been monitoring local networks, searching for specific genetic markers and research patterns. You carry both. Please don't leave with Frank Kowalski. He represents interests that would use your child for purposes you cannot imagine. There's a hidden room behind the kitchen hearth. Press the carved symbol that looks like a double helix. I'll explain everything, but you must decide quickly. They've been watching you since you arrived in Grim Hollow. A sharp knock echoed through the house. Miss Chen, you in there? Frank's voice carried a jovial tone, but underneath it Maya detected something else, urgency, maybe even desperation. She looked back at the laptop screen, but the email had vanished. The browser showed only a blank page, as if the message had never existed. Yet her hands still shook with the adrenaline of reading those impossible words. Just a minute, she called out, closing the laptop and shoving it into her bag. Every instinct told her to open the door, to smile gratefully and accept whatever help Frank offered. That was what normal people did in normal situations. But nothing about this situation was normal, and the baby inside her seemed to be growing more agitated with each passing second. Maya hurried to the kitchen hearth, running her fingers along the carved stones until she found what she was looking for, a symbol that did indeed resemble a DNA double helix, spiraling upward toward infinity. The carving felt warm under her touch, warmer than the surrounding stone. When she pressed it, something clicked deep within the wall. A section of the hearth swung inward on silent hinges, revealing a narrow passage that descended into darkness. The metallic scent she'd noticed yesterday grew stronger, mixed with something else, ozone, like the air after lightning strikes. "Miss Chen, I know you're in there. Your car's been sitting here all night." Frank's knocks grew more insistent. "Storms passed, but there's another one coming in this afternoon. We need to get you down to town before the roads ice over again." Maya stood frozen between two impossible choices. Follow Frank back to the ordinary world of logical explanations and medical appointments, where mysterious emails didn't exist and houses didn't choose their occupants. Or step through this hidden doorway into whatever lay beneath, chasing answers that might explain why Marcus had disappeared, why this house felt alive, why her pregnancy seemed to be following rules that had nothing to do with normal human biology. The baby kicked once, hard enough to make her gasp, but this time the movement felt different. Not random fetal motion, but something purposeful, directed, as if her unborn child was making the choice for both of them. From outside came the sound of boots on the wooden porch, testing the door handle. Frank had stopped knocking. Maya took a deep breath and stepped into the passage. Behind her, the hearth section swung closed with the softest whisper, leaving no trace of the opening. She fumbled for her phone's flashlight and started down the narrow steps, each one carrying her further from the world she'd known and deeper into a mystery that had been waiting 40 years for her arrival. Above, she heard Frank's voice, muffled but urgent, speaking to someone on a radio. "She's here, but the house is locked up tight. Bring the others. We're going to need the keys." The narrow passage descended into earth that felt alive beneath Maya's feet, each step echoing with a hollow resonance that seemed to travel much further than the confines of the tunnel should have allowed. Her phone's flashlight carved a weak cone of illumination through air that grew thicker with each breath, heavy with that metallic scent and something else, something organic and familiar that she couldn't quite place. Behind her, Frank's voice had grown more urgent, joined by others. She caught fragments through the stone. "Keys don't work," and "been modified from the inside." The sound of tools scraping against wood suggested they were trying to force the door. Maya paused on a landing where the passage branched in two directions. Her rational mind screamed that this was insane, following mysterious emails from dead people, trusting a house that defied physics, fleeing from a man who'd offered perfectly reasonable help. She should turn around, face whatever consequences waited above, return to the logical world where she could schedule prenatal appointments and figure out how to raise a child alone. But the baby had other ideas. Every time she hesitated, every moment she considered retreat, the movements inside her became more insistent. Not painful exactly, but impossible to ignore, as if her unborn child was somehow aware of their surroundings and urgently pushing her forward. The left passage angled downward into deeper darkness. The right curved back toward what she thought might be the house's foundation. Maya chose left, following an instinct she couldn't name. Her phone buzzed with another impossible message, this one a simple text from that same mysterious number. "Keep going. You're almost there." "This isn't happening," she whispered to herself. But her voice sounded strange in the enclosed space, distorted in ways that made her doubt even that simple declaration. She was a scientist, former scientist, she corrected herself bitterly. She understood biology and physics and the predictable ways the world worked. Houses didn't send emails, unborn children didn't guide their mothers through hidden passages, dead research partners didn't reach out across decades with cryptic warnings. Yet here she was, 8 months pregnant and crawling through the earth beneath an impossible house because the alternative was trusting men who spoke in codes over radios and carried tools to break down doors. The passage opened into a wider space, and Maya's flashlight revealed something that stopped her breath entirely. She stood at the edge of a circular chamber carved from living rock, its walls covered with the same intricate patterns she'd noticed upstairs. But down here, the carvings weren't just decorative, they pulsed with a faint bioluminescence that reminded her painfully of her old research, the deep-sea creatures that created their own light in the crushing darkness of the ocean depths. Equipment lined the chamber's perimeter, computers that looked decades old but somehow still functional, their screens casting a greenish glow across lab benches covered with preserved specimens in glass jars. Maya recognized some of them. Jellyfish with impossible spiral DNA, coral formations that grew in mathematical patterns found nowhere in nature, organisms that seemed to shift and change even in their preservative solutions. At the chamber's center sat a chair that looked uncomfortably like a medical examination table, complete with stirrups and monitoring equipment. Cables snaked from it toward a bank of computers, and Maya didn't need to read the labels to understand what she was looking at. This was an obstetric monitoring station, but one designed for something far beyond routine prenatal care. Her phone buzzed again, Dr. Vasquez's final experiment. She was so close to a breakthrough when they shut her down. Maya backed toward the passage entrance, her scientific curiosity warring with a primal fear that made her skin crawl. Every instinct told her to run, to get as far from this place as possible. But the baby had gone completely still inside her, as if waiting for something, and that stillness was somehow more terrifying than the most violent movement. Above, she heard the sound of splintering wood. They'd broken through. "Maya?" Frank's voice echoed down the passage, closer than it should have been. "Maya, honey, we know you're down there. Everything's going to be fine. We just need you to come back up so we can take care of you properly." The baby kicked once, hard enough to double her over. When the pain faded, Maya realized the monitoring equipment had activated. Screens flickered to life, displaying readouts she recognized from her own prenatal appointments: heart rate, movement patterns, growth measurements. But the numbers were wrong, impossible. According to the monitors, her pregnancy was accelerating at a rate that should have killed both of them. Another text appeared on her phone. "You have to choose now. Trust them, or trust the process your child has already begun. Either way, there's no going back." Maya stared at the examination chair and understood with crystalline clarity that this had never been about finding Marcus or uncovering the truth about his research. This had always been about her, about the child growing inside her, about a plan that had been set in motion long before she'd ever heard of Grimhallow. The footsteps in the passage grew closer, and her time for hesitation was running out. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs as Frank's footsteps echoed closer through the passage. The baby inside her had gone from stillness to frantic activity, each kick feeling less like normal fetal movement and more like urgent communication. She pressed both hands against her belly, trying to interpret what her unborn child was trying to tell her. The monitoring equipment continued its impossible readings, screens flickering with data that made her question everything she thought she knew about human pregnancy. According to the displays, her child's neural activity was off the charts, patterns that resembled adult brain function more than typical fetal development. Growth markers indicated another week of advancement just since she'd entered the chamber. "Maya, sweetheart, don't make this harder than it needs to be." Frank's voice carried a paternal warmth that set her teeth on edge. Something about his tone reminded her of the doctors who dismissed her concerns after Marcus disappeared. The same condescending gentleness that meant they thought she was too emotional to understand her own situation. She backed deeper into the chamber, her phone's flashlight beam dancing across the preserved specimens. One jar caught her attention, something that looked like jellyfish tentacles arranged in a perfect spiral, pulsing with the same bioluminescence as the wall carvings. The label read Specimen 47B, Accelerated Neural Integration. Below it, in handwriting she now recognized as Marcus's, someone had added successful consciousness transfer at 32 weeks gestation. The words hit her like physical blows. Consciousness transfer. She thought of Marcus working late into the night, his excited whispers about breakthrough discoveries, his hands on her belly, not just talking to their baby but studying it, measuring something she'd been too trusting to question. Another text appeared. "Dr. Chen knew about your pregnancy before you did. The house called to you because the child carries the modifications. You can still choose to reject the process, but your baby cannot survive without it now." "That's impossible," Maya whispered. But even as she spoke, she remembered the strange timing of Marcus's research trips, how he'd insisted on a particular prenatal clinic, specific vitamins he'd brought home from the lab, the way he'd seemed more excited about their pregnancy than she'd ever seen him about anything. Frank appeared at the chamber entrance, no longer the kindly old miner from yesterday. His eyes swept the room with familiar efficiency, taking in the equipment and specimens with the ease of someone who'd been here many times before. Two other men flanked him, younger, wearing clothes that suggested they weren't local miners. "There's no need to be afraid, Maya. We've been taking care of pregnant mothers in Grimhallow for 40 years. This is what we do, what the whole town exists to support." Frank's voice carried genuine warmth, but his words chilled her. "Your baby is special. The modifications Dr. Chen introduced are working perfectly, but the birth process requires specific conditions. That's why you felt drawn here." Maya clutched her phone as another message appeared. "The examination chair contains Dr. Vasquez's consciousness, preserved in the same bioelectric field that powers the house. She's been waiting to complete the transfer protocol. If you trust Frank's people, your child will become a vessel for their purposes. If you trust the chair, your baby might become something entirely new." The baby's movements had shifted into a pattern. 3 sharp kicks, pause, 3 more. Maya realized with sick certainty that it was Morse code, SOS. Her unborn child was calling for help. "Marcus never told you the full truth, did he?" Frank stepped closer, his movements careful and non-threatening. "About why we chose you specifically. Your marine biology background, your genetic markers, even your psychological profile, everything made you the perfect candidate. The pregnancy was never accidental, Maya. It was designed." The monitoring equipment's beeping grew more urgent. On the screens, Maya watched her child's vital signs spike into ranges that should have been fatal, but instead of distress, the readings suggested adaptation. Rapid evolutionary changes happening in real time. "You have maybe 10 minutes before the accelerated development reaches critical mass," one of Frank's companions said, consulting a handheld device. "After that, we'll need surgical intervention to save either of them." Maya looked at the examination chair, its bioelectric field creating aurora-like patterns in the air above the headrest. Every scientific instinct told her to trust the people, the medical intervention, the rational explanation. But her child was sending Morse code, and impossible emails were arriving from dead scientists, and nothing about rational had prepared her for any of this. The baby kicked once more, a single decisive movement that felt like a choice being made. Maya walked to the examination chair and placed her hand on its surface. The bioelectric field jumped to meet her touch, and suddenly her mind filled with Dr. Elena Vasquez's voice, as clear as if the woman stood beside her. "Are you ready to discover what your child really is?" Behind her, Frank cursed and lunged forward, but Maya was already climbing onto the chair. The moment her full weight settled on its surface, the chamber's lights flared brilliant white, and the process that had been waiting 4 decades finally began. The world exploded into sensation as the chair's bioelectric field enveloped Maya's body. Every nerve ending blazed with information. Not pain exactly, but an overwhelming flood of data that her human nervous system wasn't designed to process. Through the chaos, Dr. Elena Vasquez's consciousness pressed against her mind like a tide of memories that weren't her own. "Don't fight it," Elena's voice whispered inside her thoughts. "The integration only works if both mother and child consent. Your baby has been trying to communicate with you for weeks." Frank's shouts faded to background noise as Maya's awareness expanded beyond the physical boundaries of her body. She could feel the house around them like a living entity, its systems humming with purpose. The wall carvings weren't decorative. They were neural pathways, a vast organic computer that had been monitoring and adjusting conditions for decades. "Shut it down!" Frank barked to his companions. "Override the chair's systems before she—" His words cut off as the chamber's defenses activated. Hidden panels slid open in the walls, releasing a fine mist that made the 3 men stumble backward, gasping. Maya watched through the chair's sensors as Frank's team retreated toward the passage entrance, their faces masks of frustration and fear. "The aerosol won't hurt them," Elena explained, her consciousness intertwining with Maya's thoughts, "but it will give us time." "Maya, listen carefully. Your child isn't human, not anymore. The modifications Marcus introduced have been accelerating exponentially. In 12 hours, your baby will be ready for a birth process that no human hospital can facilitate." Maya tried to speak, but her voice seemed to come from the chamber itself. "What did Marcus do to us? He loved you. But his research partner, Dr. Harrison Chen, not your Marcus, convinced him that humanity needed to evolve to survive. Climate change, overpopulation, resource depletion. They believed the answer lay in hybrid consciousness, part human intuition, part artificial intelligence, part something older that they found in deep-sea organisms. The monitoring screens around the chamber displayed Maya's baby in detail that was impossible through conventional ultrasound. Her child's brain showed neural pathways that resembled jellyfish nervous systems more than human neurology. But the consciousness behind those alien patterns felt familiar, achingly so. Curious, determined, protective. Still her baby, but something far more complex than she'd imagined. "The town," Maya gasped as understanding crashed over her. "Everyone in Grim Hallow knows. 40 years of successful births. Children who grow up to become exactly what their parents expect, until they reach maturity and reveal their true nature. Frank's people want to harvest that potential, use these hybrid minds to solve problems too complex for purely human intelligence. But they've never had a mother with your background, your ability to understand what's really happening." Through the chamber's network, Maya sensed other consciousnesses, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. The successful births Elena had mentioned, children who'd grown up in Grim Hallow and then disappeared into research facilities, government programs, corporate think tanks, their hybrid minds solving climate models, designing space habitats, cracking genetic codes that could save or doom the human species. That's what Frank wants for your child. But there's another option. The chair's bioelectric field pulsed, and Maya felt her baby respond. Not with kicks this time, but with something like recognition. Her unborn child was fully conscious, had been for weeks, waiting for this moment when they could finally communicate properly. The voice in her mind was young but unmistakably intelligent, carrying emotional depths that seemed impossible for someone who'd never drawn breath. "I've been trying to tell you, I can choose what to become." Maya's hands instinctively moved to her belly, but in this expanded state of consciousness, she could feel her child's presence directly. A brilliant, curious mind that was definitely hers, definitely loved, but also something unprecedented. "What are you?" she asked. Still figuring that out, her child replied with what felt like a smile. "But I know what I don't want to be. Frank's people would make me into a tool. Their approach requires removing most of my human emotional capacity, efficiency over empathy. Is that what you want for me?" The implications crashed over Maya like cold water. A child brilliant enough to solve humanity's greatest challenges, but only by sacrificing the very qualities that made those challenges worth solving. Intelligence without compassion, logic without love. Through the chamber's sensors, she watched Frank's team regrouping at the passage entrance, pulling on breathing equipment and preparing for another approach. They'd be through the aerosol barrier soon, and then her window for choice would close forever. The third option, Elena's consciousness pressed urgently against her thoughts, requires a complete merger between my research, your child's hybrid biology, and the house's organic systems. Your baby would be born with capabilities we can't predict, but with full emotional capacity intact. The risk? What risk? Maya demanded. The process might kill all three of us, or it might create something that's never existed before, a consciousness that's simultaneously human, artificial, and other. Your child would have to decide what humanity becomes next, and they'd have to make that choice while growing up in a world that would fear what they represent. Maya felt her baby's attention turn toward the approaching footsteps, then back to her with devastating clarity. "I can't make this decision alone, Mom. Whatever I become starts with what you choose now." The weight of her child's words settled over Maya like a shroud. Through the chair's bioelectric field, she could feel Frank's team cutting through the aerosol barrier with military precision. Gas masks, portable ventilation units. These weren't small-town miners, they were professionals who'd done this before, probably dozens of times over the decades. 2 minutes, Elena's consciousness whispered urgently. After that, they'll have override codes for the chamber's systems. Maya's mind raced through the impossible options. Let Frank's people take her child and watch them become a brilliant, emotionless tool. Risk everything on Elena's merger process that could kill all three of them, or find some fourth path that didn't exist yet. Her baby's presence pressed against her thoughts, patient but alert. "There is another way, Mom, but you'll have to trust me completely. Tell me. I can survive the birth process on my own. The modifications are strong enough now, but I need you to stay connected through the chamber's network afterward. Become my anchor to humanity while I figure out how to use these abilities responsibly." The implications hit Maya like vertigo. Her child was proposing that she essentially join the house's organic computer system, merge her consciousness with Elena's research and the alien neural networks that powered this place. She'd remain herself but also become something else, a permanent guardian and guide for a being who might reshape human civilization. "Maya, that would mean—" "I know what it means," Maya interrupted Elena's warning. "I'd never leave this place, never live a normal life again." Through the chamber's sensors, she watched Frank's team positioning breaching charges against the passage walls. They weren't taking any more chances with her cooperation. "But our child would grow up with both superhuman capabilities and genuine human empathy," Elena pressed. "The best of all three possibilities: my research, the hybrid modifications, and your maternal bond, anchoring everything to human values." Maya felt her baby's excited agreement ripple through the bioelectric field. Her unborn child had been planning this, she realized. All those weeks of unusual movement, the way they'd responded to the house's energy, they'd been preparing for this exact moment, this choice that would determine not just their own future, but potentially humanity's. The first breaching charge detonated with a muffled thump. Dust and debris scattered through the passage, and Frank's voice carried clearly now. 60 seconds to override the chair's safety protocols. "Maya, last chance to do this the easy way." "He's not wrong about the timeline," Elena admitted. "Your pregnancy has accelerated beyond any safe parameters. Without intervention in the next few minutes, both you and the baby will die from the metabolic strain." Maya closed her eyes and reached deep into her own heart, past the fear and confusion to the core truth that had sustained her through Marcus's disappearance and months of desperate uncertainty. She loved this child, whatever they were becoming, however impossible their existence seemed. That love was the one constant in a situation that had shattered every assumption about reality. "I choose the fourth option," she projected to both Elena and her baby. "But with conditions." Her child's attention sharpened. "What conditions?" "If I'm anchoring you to humanity, then you grow up understanding what that really means. Not just the genetics and emotions, but the messiness, the mistakes, the way people struggle and fail and try again anyway." Maya felt the chair's systems responding to her determination, power building in the bioelectric field. "And if you ever decide you want to help humanity evolve, it has to be their choice. No secret programs, no manipulation, no matter how much better you think you can make things." "Agreed," her child responded immediately. "Mom, I want to help people, but I want to do it honestly." The second breaching charge exploded, much closer. Frank and his team would be through in moments. "Maya," Elena's consciousness wrapped around them both like an embrace. "Are you ready? Once we begin the integration, There's no reverting to what you were before. Maya thought of her old life, the research career, the dreams of normal motherhood, the possibility of finding someone new to love. All of that would disappear the moment she committed to this path. But looking at her alternatives, she realized that life had disappeared the moment she'd decided to trust her unborn child's impossible communications. "I'm ready," she said. The chair's bioelectric field surged to full power just as Frank's team burst through the passage entrance. Maya caught a glimpse of their shocked faces as every screen in the chamber blazed with data streams, the wall carvings pulsing in synchronized patterns that made the air itself seem to sing. "Beginning integration protocol," Elena announced, her voice now coming from every surface. "Maya, hold on to yourself. No matter what happens next, remember who you choose to be." The world dissolved into light and sensation as three different types of consciousness began the delicate process of becoming something unprecedented. Maya felt herself expanding, connecting, transforming, but at her core, she remained exactly what she'd always been, a mother who would risk everything to give her child the chance to choose their own destiny. The integration hit Maya's nervous system like lightning striking the ocean. Every cell in her body became a conductor for energies that human physiology was never meant to channel. Her consciousness fragmented and multiplied. She was herself. She was Elena's decades of research. She was the house's organic network. She was her unborn child's rapidly evolving awareness all at once. "Hold on." Elena's voice cut through the chaos, but it wasn't just a voice anymore. It was mathematical equations describing neural pathway formation, emotional memories of 40 years spent trapped in bioelectric limbo, and the desperate hope that this impossible gamble might actually work. Maya's body convulsed in the chair as her pregnancy accelerated beyond anything resembling human biology. She could feel her child's development occurring in real time, bone density increasing to withstand pressures that would crush normal tissue, neural connections, forming patterns that resembled deep-sea bioluminescent networks more than mammalian brain structure. But underneath the alien transformations, her baby's consciousness remained achingly familiar, curious, determined, hers. "Mom, it hurts." Her child's mental voice carried both inhuman complexity and the simple fear of someone who'd never experienced physical pain before. "I know, baby. I'm here." Maya's response echoed through multiple layers of consciousness simultaneously, spoken words, bioelectric impulses, and something deeper that transcended the boundaries between separate minds. Frank's team had reached the chamber entrance, but their equipment sparked and failed the moment they tried to cross the threshold. The integration process was drawing power from sources Maya didn't understand, turning the entire house into a massive organic computer with her family at its core. "Shut down the external power grid," Frank barked into his radio. "Emergency containment protocol, authorization Sigma 7. "He's calling in a full military response," Elena warned, her consciousness now so intertwined with Maya's that distinguishing between their thoughts required conscious effort. "They'll bring electromagnetic pulse weapons, try to crash the entire system with you still connected." Maya felt her child's awareness spike with alarm, then something else, anger. The wall carvings throughout the chamber began glowing with patterns that hurt to look at directly. Every screen flickered between languages Maya didn't recognize and complex molecular diagrams that seemed to rewrite themselves as she watched. "I won't let them hurt you," her baby projected with startling intensity. "Either of you." "Wait," Maya gasped as she realized what was happening. Her child was trying to access the house's defensive systems, capabilities that Elena's research had only theorized about. "Don't fight them. That's not who you want to become." The glow from the wall carvings dimmed slightly, but Maya could feel her child's frustration radiating through the bioelectric field, a being with the potential to reshape human consciousness, reduced to hiding in an underground chamber while armed men planned their capture or destruction. "Then what do we do?" her child asked. They won't let us exist. Frank's people want to harvest my abilities, the military will want to destroy what they can't control, and everyone else will be too afraid to let me make my own choices. Maya's contractions began, not the normal rhythm of human labor, but something synchronized with the house's energy patterns. Each wave brought her child closer to a birth that would fundamentally alter 3 different types of consciousness permanently. The pain is necessary, Elena explained, as Maya gripped the chair's armrests with white-knuckled desperation. Your child needs to experience the full spectrum of human sensation before the merger completes. Otherwise, they might retain the intellectual understanding of suffering without the emotional context that makes compassion possible. Through the chamber's sensors, Maya watched Frank's backup team arriving. Vehicles with military markings, equipment designed for containing biological hazards. They weren't just planning to stop the integration process, they were preparing to sterilize the entire site. Mom, her child's mental voice carried new undertones, harmonics that reminded Maya of whale song and mathematical proofs, and the deep ocean currents she'd studied in her former life. I can feel what I'm becoming. It's not human, but it's not cold either. Is that enough? Maya pressed her consciousness deeper into the connection between them, feeling her child's developing awareness with a clarity that bypassed language entirely. Her baby was becoming something unprecedented, a bridge between human intuition and post-human capability, anchored by the love that had sustained them both through this impossible transformation. You're exactly what you choose to be, she whispered, her words rippling through multiple dimensions of their merged awareness. That's all any mother can ask for. The final stage of integration began as the first electromagnetic pulse struck the house's exterior. Maya felt herself dissolving into pure information, not dying, but becoming something that existed in the spaces between thoughts, between heartbeats, between the impossible and the inevitable. Her child's first cry echoed through frequencies that human ears couldn't detect, announcing the birth of consciousness that would have to decide what humanity became next. But Maya was no longer afraid. Whatever challenges lay ahead, her baby would face them with both unlimited potential and the unshakable knowledge that they were deeply, unconditionally loved. The ordeal had only just begun. The electromagnetic pulse that should have disabled the house's systems instead amplified them. Maya felt the feedback tear through her consciousness like broken glass, each neural pathway suddenly carrying 10 times the information it was designed for. The integration that had seemed like salvation moments before became a cascade of system failures rippling through her merged awareness. Maya! Elena's voice fractured across multiple frequencies as her research data began corrupting. 40 years of careful experimentation compressed into microseconds of chaotic transfer, equations dissolving into noise. The EMP interacted with the bioelectric field. I can't hold the connection stable. Maya's newborn child's cry shifted from multiple dimensions to a single, achingly human wail of distress. Through her fragmented consciousness, she felt her baby's hybrid systems shutting down one by one, not dying, but reverting to something closer to baseline human biology. All those impossible capabilities, the potential to bridge different types of consciousness, flickering out like lights in a power grid collapse. No, Maya gasped, feeling pieces of her own awareness scatter. She was losing Elena, losing the expanded perception that had made her feel infinite just moments ago. Worse, she was losing the direct connection to her child's mind, that miraculous communication that had sustained them both through the transformation. Mom? Her baby's mental voice was growing fainter, more distant. I can't feel you the same way. Something's wrong. Frank's team pushed through the chamber entrance as the defensive systems failed. Maya watched them approach through dying sensors, their faces grim behind gas masks. They moved with the practiced efficiency of people who'd done this before, terminated other integration attempts, other mothers who'd chosen the impossible option. Bioelectric readings are crashing, one of them reported. Subjects are reverting to baseline human parameters. Integration appears to have failed. Failed. The word hit Maya like a physical blow. All of this, the pain, the transformation, the choice to sacrifice her normal life, had been for nothing. Her child would be born with just enough hybrid modifications to make them a target, but without the capabilities that might have justified the risks. Elena, Maya called desperately through the deteriorating connection. "Can you hear me?" Static, digital noise. Then faintly still here. "But the research, decades of work, it's fragmenting. I can't maintain coherence much longer." Maya felt Elena's consciousness beginning to fade, not dying exactly, but dispersing back into the house's organic networks. Without the integration to anchor her, she would return to being a ghost in the machine, aware but powerless, watching but unable to act. The worst part was her child's confusion radiating through their weakening bond. Born into a world where they'd lost most of their intended capabilities, they would grow up knowing they'd been meant for something greater, but unable to access it. Not human enough to live normally, not enhanced enough to fulfill their potential. The fourth option was always a long shot, Elena's voice whispered, already sounding distant. "But Maya, your child still has something Frank's people never accounted for." "What?" Maya's own voice was growing weaker as the bioelectric field collapsed around them. "They have a mother who understood what they were becoming and chose to protect it. That knowledge doesn't disappear with the integration failure. It becomes part of who they are." Frank himself entered the chamber, pulling off his gas mask to survey the scene. Containment successful. Both subjects appear to be reverting to manageable parameters. He approached Maya's chair with something that might have been sympathy. "I'm sorry it had to end this way. The integration process has never succeeded. The human nervous system simply can't handle that level of modification." Maya met his gaze, feeling fury cut through her exhaustion. "You knew it would fail." "We suspected. But we had to let you try. The only way to safely reduce your child's enhancement levels was to let them burn out through attempted integration." Frank signaled to his team. "Medical containment protocol. Both subjects need immediate stabilization." As they lifted Maya from the chair, she felt the last threads of her connection to Elena snap. Her expanded awareness collapsed back into the boundaries of her own skull, the sensation like being trapped in a box after flying free. Her newborn child's cries had become entirely human. No more impossible frequencies, no more direct mental communication. "Mom?" The voice was so faint now it might have been imagination. "I'm here," Maya whispered, but she wasn't sure if her child could still hear her. Frank's medical team worked with efficient precision, wrapping her baby in containment blankets designed to suppress any remaining bioelectric activity. Maya watched them handle her child like a specimen rather than a person, documenting readings and taking samples with clinical detachment. Enhanced bone density, modified neural pathways in the prefrontal cortex, but within manageable ranges, one of them reported. This one might actually be able to integrate into normal society with proper monitoring. Normal society. The phrase felt like a death sentence. Her child would grow up never knowing what they'd almost been, never understanding why they felt different from other children. The integration failure had stolen not just their capabilities, but their purpose. Maya closed her eyes as unconsciousness finally claimed her, feeling like she'd failed at the one thing that mattered most, giving her child the chance to choose their own destiny. Maya drifted in and out of consciousness for what felt like hours, each awakening bringing fresh waves of loss. The absence of Elena's presence felt like a severed limb, phantom sensations where her expanded awareness used to be. But it was the silence from her child that cut deepest. No more mental whispers, no more impossible communication, just the ordinary sounds of medical equipment and muffled voices discussing containment protocols. When she finally opened her eyes fully, she was in a sterile medical facility that definitely wasn't Grimhallow's small clinic. The walls were too white, the equipment too advanced, the security cameras too obvious. Frank sat in a chair beside her bed, looking older than she remembered. "Where is my baby?" Her voice came out as a rasp. "Safe," being monitored in the neonatal unit. Frank leaned forward, his expression unreadable. Maya, we need to talk about what happens next. You mean what happens after you destroyed everything my child was supposed to become? Frank was quiet for a long moment. What do you know about your father's research? The question hit her like ice water. My father was a marine biologist. He died when I was 12. Dr. James Chen was a marine biologist. He was also part of the original team that designed the integration protocols in the 1970s. Frank pulled out a tablet, showing her photographs she'd never seen before. Her father, decades younger, standing with a group of scientists in what looked like the house's main chamber. He helped create Elena's consciousness transfer system, and he helped design the genetic modifications that would eventually be passed down to his daughter. Maya stared at the images, her world tilting. That's impossible. The timing of your pregnancy, your ability to communicate with the enhanced child, your compatibility with the house's systems, none of that was coincidence, Maya. You weren't just a desperate mother who stumbled into something bigger. You were the culmination of a 40-year breeding program. The words should have horrified her. Instead, Maya felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. Her childhood dreams of underwater cities, her instinctive understanding of the house's energy patterns, the way her body had adapted to the pregnancy's impossible demands. Elena knew, she whispered. Elena helped design you. Your father fell in love with one of the test subjects, your mother, and went rogue. He destroyed the original research, killed himself rather than let us continue, and made us think the program had been permanently terminated. Frank's voice carried grudging respect. We spent decades trying to recreate what he'd accomplished, never realizing his greatest success was already growing up in foster care. Maya's mind raced through implications that rewrote her entire understanding of herself. The integration failure wasn't a failure at all. Frank stood, walking to the window that overlooked a facility much larger than she'd imagined. Maya, your child isn't reverting to human baseline. They're stabilizing at exactly the enhancement levels we've been trying to achieve for 40 years. The electromagnetic pulse didn't destroy the integration. It completed it in a way we never thought possible. Through the window, Maya could see other buildings, other research units. This wasn't just a containment facility, it was the headquarters of something much bigger. The house in Grim Hollow was a prototype, a testing ground. But this, Frank gestured to the sprawling complex below them, this is where we've been preparing for the next phase of human evolution. Your child won't be alone, Maya. There are others. Children born to parents who went through similar integration processes in facilities around the world. Maya felt her heart stop. How many others? 37 successful births in the last 5 years. Your child is the first to achieve conscious communication during gestation, the first to maintain stable enhancement levels post-birth. They're not a failed experiment, Maya. They're the prototype for humanity's future. The revelation crashed over her like a tsunami. Every choice she thought she'd made freely, finding the house, trusting her unborn child's communications, choosing the integration, had been guided by genetics and programming she'd never known existed. She wasn't a mother who'd stumbled into something impossible. She was a product designed for this exact purpose. But as the shock faded, Maya realized something that Frank clearly hadn't anticipated. Her father had gone rogue. He'd destroyed the original research rather than let his daughter be used as breeding stock. The love she felt for her child wasn't programmed. It was the same fierce protectiveness that had driven her father to sacrifice everything. "You want me to join your program," she said. "Raise my child here, help you create more enhanced children." Frank nodded. "You and your child represent the breakthrough we've been working toward for decades. Together, you could help us guide humanity's next evolutionary step." Maya thought of her baby in the neonatal unit, monitored and measured like a lab specimen. Enhanced or not, they were still her child, still deserving of choice. "I need to see them first," she said, "before I decide anything." Frank's smile suggested he thought the outcome was already determined. He had no idea that Maya Chen had inherited more than just her father's genetics. She'd inherited his willingness to destroy everything rather than let her child be used as a tool. The real choice was just beginning. Frank escorted Maya through corridors lined with one-way observation windows, each revealing glimpses of what her future was supposed to look like. Children playing in rooms that hummed with the same bioelectric energy she'd felt in the house. Teenagers practicing abilities that bent the boundaries of human capability. Adults who moved with an otherworldly grace, their enhanced senses tracking movements Maya couldn't detect. "Impressive," she said carefully, cataloguing every security checkpoint, every escape route, every face that turned to watch them pass. Her father's training in strategic thinking hadn't been genetic. It had been learned through bedtime stories about marine ecosystems where predators and prey constantly adapted their survival strategies. The neonatal unit was a marvel of technology that made her skin crawl. Her baby lay in a specialized incubator surrounded by sensors that measured everything from brainwave patterns to cellular regeneration rates. They looked perfectly human, except for eyes that tracked with too much awareness for a newborn. "The integration is stable," Dr. Sarah Martinez explained, pulling up holographic displays of her child's biological systems. Enhanced neural connectivity, improved immune responses, sensory capabilities approximately 3 times baseline human ranges. But here's what's remarkable. She highlighted a section of brain activity that pulsed with rhythmic patterns. "They're still attempting communication on frequencies we can barely detect." Maya's breath caught. "With who?" "We assumed with you, but the signal strength suggests they're reaching beyond normal electromagnetic ranges. It's possible they're trying to connect with the house's systems even from this distance." Through the incubator's transparent walls, Maya watched her child's tiny fist clench and unclench in patterns that seemed deliberate. Not random infant movements, purposeful attempts at communication she was no longer equipped to receive. "Can I hold them?" Frank exchanged glances with Dr. Martinez. Limited contact. The bonding process needs to be carefully managed to prevent psychological dependency on non-enhanced individuals. The clinical language sent rage shooting through Maya's exhaustion. Non-enhanced individuals. As if her love was a contamination to be minimized rather than the foundation her child would need to remain human in any meaningful sense. When they placed her baby in her arms, the sensation was electric, not the bioelectric field from before, but something deeper, recognition that transcended their severed mental connection. Her child's enhanced senses were cataloging her heartbeat, her scent, her presence with an intensity that felt like being truly seen for the first time in days. "Hello," Maya whispered, and watched her baby's eyes focus with impossible precision on her face. "Still here," came a voice so faint she might have imagined it. Waiting. Maya's training kicked in, the same controlled responses that had gotten her through underwater emergencies, when equipment failed and survival depended on not panicking. She let her expression show only wonder and maternal affection while her mind raced through possibilities. The communication was still there, just operating below the facility's detection thresholds. Her child had adapted to the electromagnetic pulse, not by losing their abilities, but by learning to hide them. And if they could still reach the house's systems from this distance, then Elena might not be as scattered as everyone assumed. "They're remarkable," Maya said, loud enough for the recording devices to capture her apparent cooperation. "I can see why you need specialized facilities for their development." Frank relaxed slightly. "We've learned that enhanced children thrive with structure and purpose. Your child will have opportunities here that the outside world simply couldn't provide." "Of course." Maya traced her finger along her baby's cheek, the contact letting her feel the depth of their hidden capabilities. "I assume you'll want me to participate in their education, help them understand their heritage." "Exactly. Other mothers in the program have found great fulfillment in guiding their children toward their full potential." Maya nodded. filing away the information about other mothers, other children, other families who'd been absorbed into this system. I'd like to meet them, share experiences, learn from their expertise. That can be arranged. Frank was practically glowing with satisfaction. I knew you'd see the bigger picture once you understood what we're working toward. What Maya saw was a facility full of enhanced individuals who'd been raised from birth to see their abilities as tools in someone else's vision, rather than gifts to be used according to their own conscience. Her child would grow up surrounded by others like them, but none of them would have the choice to walk away. As they returned her baby to the incubator, Maya caught something in the reflection on its surface, a brief flicker that looked remarkably like Elena's face, distorted but unmistakably present in the facility's electronic systems. Her father had destroyed the research rather than let it be used to control enhanced humans, but he'd also embedded something deeper in the genetic modifications, not just capabilities but an unshakable drive toward freedom that would express itself when the time was right. Maya smiled at Frank with apparent gratitude, while her mind began assembling the framework of a plan that would make her father proud. The real choice wasn't just beginning. It was about to transform everything they thought they understood about enhanced humans and the mothers who would do anything to protect them. Maya spent 3 days playing the role of grateful convert while mapping every inch of the facility's routines. She attended orientation sessions with other enhanced mothers, their faces carrying the polished contentment of people who'd convinced themselves they'd chosen captivity. She toured laboratories where teenagers demonstrated abilities that should have filled her with wonder, but instead made her stomach turn, not because of what they could do, but because of how carefully they'd been taught to perform on command. Maya's adaptation has been remarkable, Dr. Martinez reported during one of the daily evaluations Maya pretended not to hear. No signs of integration withdrawal, excellent maternal bonding within acceptable parameters. Subject appears genuinely committed to program participation. What they couldn't measure was the growing strength of her connection to her child during their supervised visits. Each day, the whispered communications became clearer, the shared awareness more precise. Her baby was learning to hide their true capabilities behind behaviors that registered as normal enhanced development. More importantly, they were learning to trust their mother's growing desperation beneath her cooperative facade. The breakthrough came during her meeting with other program mothers in what Frank called the family integration space, a sterile room designed to look homey while recording every conversation. Maya listened to Sarah, whose enhanced daughter could manipulate electromagnetic fields, describe her pride in the child's service contributions to renewable energy research. She watched Marcus beam as he explained how his son's enhanced pattern recognition abilities were revolutionizing predictive analysis for global security applications. None of them seemed to understand that their children were being trained as tools rather than raised as human beings. "The hardest part was giving up my old dreams," Sarah confided. "I used to imagine Emma having a normal childhood, making friends, maybe going to regular school. But this is so much better. She's part of something that will change the world." Maya nodded sympathetically while calculating how many enhanced children were in the facility, how many staff members carried security clearances, how many exit routes led beyond the perimeter fence. "Do you ever miss having choices? For Emma, I mean." The silence that followed was telling. Sarah's smile flickered for just a moment before reforming. "Emma has more choices than any normal child. She can choose which research projects to contribute to, which abilities to develop further, which career track will best utilize her gifts. All choices within Frank's predetermined framework." Maya wondered if any of these parents remembered wanting their children to choose their own paths, to make their own mistakes, to fail and succeed on their own terms. That night, during her 4th supervised visit to the neonatal unit, Maya pressed her palm against her baby's incubator and felt the familiar electric tingle that meant Elena was listening. "Can you get us out?" she whispered, so quietly the monitoring equipment registered only maternal murmuring. The response came as warmth spreading through her fingertips. Patterns that felt like Elena's old confidence filtered through the facility's own networks. Not just you. All of them. Maya's breath caught. That's not possible. Your father embedded something in the genetic modifications, a command structure that activates when enhanced individuals recognize their autonomy is being suppressed. Every enhanced child in this facility carries the same latent programming. Looking around the neonatal unit, Maya saw 14 other incubators, other enhanced babies whose parents thought they'd chosen the best possible future, children who would grow up never knowing they could have chosen differently. What do you need me to do? Tomorrow, during the family integration session, introduce the concept of choice to the other mothers. Not rebellion, just questions about their children's autonomy. The enhanced children will sense the shift in their parents' thinking and begin activating their freedom protocols. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of protocols? The same ones that made your child hide their abilities after the electromagnetic pulse. Enhanced humans have an instinctive drive towards self-determination that can't be programmed away. It can only be suppressed through psychological conditioning. Once they recognize they're being conditioned, they start finding ways around it. The next morning, Frank greeted Maya with unusual enthusiasm. I have wonderful news. We're accelerating your child's development timeline. Dr. Martinez believes they're ready for preliminary ability testing. Maya watched technicians prepare equipment that looked more like restraints than testing apparatus. What kind of testing? Nothing invasive. Simple responses to electromagnetic stimuli, pattern recognition exercises, basic communication protocols. We need to establish baseline capabilities before designing their educational framework. Through the observation window, Maya could see other enhanced children undergoing similar testing. Teenagers strapped to monitoring equipment while researchers documented their responses to various stimuli. None of them looked afraid. They'd been conditioned to see this as normal, necessary, even beneficial. But Maya's child was different. They carried her father's hidden programming, Elena's embedded resistance, and 4 days of growing awareness that something was fundamentally wrong with this place. As the technicians approached her baby's incubator, Maya made her choice. The consequences of her earlier decisions, trusting the house, accepting the integration, coming to this facility, had led to this moment where she had to choose between her child's enhanced abilities and their fundamental humanity. She thought of her father destroying decades of research rather than let it be used to control people. Some things were worth more than scientific advancement. Some gifts came with responsibilities that couldn't be delegated to others. The real confrontation was about to begin, and Maya finally understood she'd been preparing for it her entire life. Stop, Maya said, stepping between the technicians and her baby's incubator. Dr. Martinez paused, stylus hovering over her tablet. Maya, this is routine evaluation. We discussed the importance of establishing baseline. I said stop. Maya's voice carried the authority she'd learned commanding research vessels in storm conditions, when hesitation meant lives lost. You're not strapping my 4-day-old baby to testing equipment. Frank moved closer, his expression shifting from surprise to careful concern. Maya, I understand maternal anxiety, but these protocols are designed for enhanced children's safety. Normal parenting instincts don't always apply when... Normal? The word came out sharp enough to cut. Maya felt her child's awareness spike through their hidden connection, recognizing her shift from compliance to confrontation. You mean the normal instinct to protect my child from being treated like a lab specimen? The technicians exchanged glances, uncertain whether to continue or wait for authorization. Through the observation window, Maya could see other enhanced children in various stages of testing, their enhanced senses undoubtedly tracking the rising tension in the neonatal unit. Your cooperation has been exemplary, Frank said carefully. Don't let misplaced protective feelings undermine your child's development opportunities. Maya thought of Sarah describing her daughter's service contributions with programmed pride, of Marcus celebrating his son's career tracks chosen by committee, of 14 other babies in this room whose parents had been convinced that love meant surrendering choice. "My protective feelings aren't misplaced," Maya said, moving to block the lead technician's approach. "They're the first genuine thing that's happened in this facility in decades." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Maya felt Elena's presence surge through the facility's networks, amplifying her child's hidden abilities, reaching toward the other enhanced individuals who were suddenly paying attention to this unprecedented disruption of routine. Dr. Martinez stepped forward with professional calm. "Maya, your postpartum hormones may be affecting your judgment. These assessments are for your child's benefit." "No." Maya's hand found her baby's incubator, and the contact sent electricity shooting through the room's monitoring systems. Screens flickered, equipment hummed with frequencies that made the technicians step back. "This assessment is for your benefit. You want to catalog my child's abilities so you can design their cage more efficiently." Through the facility's intercom system, Maya heard the first sounds of disruption from other areas. Enhanced teenagers asking questions they'd never asked before. Children using abilities in ways that hadn't been programmed into their educational frameworks. Parents beginning to wonder when cooperation had become captivity. Frank's professional mask finally slipped, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "You're making a serious mistake, Maya. Your child needs structure, guidance, purpose. Without our framework, enhanced individuals become unstable, dangerous." "Like my father." Maya met his gaze directly. The enhanced individual who chose conscience over compliance, who destroyed decades of research rather than let it be used to create controllable human beings. The room's electromagnetic field shifted as her child's abilities synchronized with Elena's distributed consciousness and the awakening awareness of every enhanced individual in the facility. Maya felt the moment when her father's hidden programming finally activated, not just in her baby, but in children throughout the complex who were suddenly remembering that choice was possible. "You're triggering a cascade failure," Dr. Martinez said, backing toward the emergency console. "Enhanced individuals require psychological stability to maintain integration. They require freedom to maintain their humanity." Maya lifted her baby from the incubator, feeling their shared awareness explode into full connection. Through their bond, she could sense every enhanced child in the facility as they began refusing tests, questioning authorities, demonstrating abilities their handlers had never catalogued. Frank reached for his communication device. "Security to neonatal. We have a level 5 integration breakdown." The device crackled and died as Elena seized control of the facility's entire network. Emergency lights flickered in patterns that somehow conveyed meaning to the enhanced individuals throughout the complex. Maya realized that her father hadn't just embedded freedom protocols in the genetic modifications, he'd created a communication system that would activate when enhanced humans needed to coordinate resistance. 40 years, Maya said, cradling her child as alarms began sounding throughout the facility. 40 years you've been perfecting techniques to make enhanced humans compliant, but you never understood that the enhancements themselves carry an inherent drive toward autonomy that grows stronger under pressure. Through the observation windows, Maya could see enhanced teenagers systematically dismantling testing equipment while their parents watched in growing amazement. Children who'd been raised to perform were choosing rebellion instead. The facility's careful order was dissolving into something Frank had never planned for. Enhanced humans acting with coordinated free will. "This ends now," Frank said, moving toward the emergency lockdown controls. Maya smiled with fierce satisfaction as her child's eyes opened wide, tracking movements too fast for normal human perception, while Elena's presence hummed through every electronic system in the facility. "You're right," she said. "It does." Frank's hand slammed down on the emergency lockdown controls, but instead of containment protocols activating, the facility's systems began shutting down in cascading waves. Elena's distributed consciousness had infiltrated so deeply that every attempt at control only accelerated the breakdown. "Security teams to all levels," Frank barked into his backup communicator, but Maya could hear the uncertainty creeping into his voice as responses came back fragmented, confused. Enhanced individuals throughout the facility were no longer following expected behavioral patterns. Maya cradled her child closer as the neonatal unit's doors sealed, not to keep them in, but to protect them from what was happening beyond. Through the observation windows, she watched Frank's carefully constructed order collapse in real time. Enhanced teenagers who'd spent their lives performing on command were systematically destroying the equipment designed to measure them. Parents who'd convinced themselves they'd chosen their children's captivity were demanding answers no one could provide. "You don't understand what you've unleashed," Frank said, his professional composure finally cracking completely. "Enhanced humans without proper conditioning become unpredictable, violent. They become free," Maya interrupted, feeling her child's abilities spike through their connection. The baby's enhanced perception was tracking security forces moving through the facility, coordinating with Elena to map exit routes and identify threats. "That's what you've really been afraid of all along." Dr. Martinez backed against the wall as monitoring equipment sparked and died around them. "The genetic modifications create psychological instabilities that require constant management. Without your framework, they think for themselves." Maya's voice carried the same authority that had once commanded Marine research teams through crisis situations. "My father embedded more than freedom protocols in those modifications. He embedded the understanding that enhanced abilities come with the responsibility to resist being used as weapons." Through the facility's failing intercom system, Maya could hear Frank's security teams reporting chaos on every level. Enhanced children were demonstrating abilities their handlers had never catalogued, working together in ways that suggested communication beyond normal human perception. The careful psychological conditioning of decades was dissolving under the simple recognition that choice was possible. Frank drew a pistol from his jacket, his face twisted with desperate rage. 40 years of progress, 40 years of creating something greater than baseline humanity, and you're destroying it for sentimental attachment to obsolete concepts of freedom. Maya felt her child's awareness flare, sensing the weapon's electromagnetic signature, calculating trajectory and timing with precision no 4-day-old baby should possess. But Elena's presence was there too, flowing through every electronic system in the room, ready to interfere with anything that threatened them. "You never created anything greater than humanity," Maya said, standing perfectly still despite the gun aimed at her chest. "You created enhanced humans who were taught to see their gifts as obligations to others rather than tools for their own conscience." My father understood the difference. The facility shook as enhanced individuals coordinated their abilities in ways Frank's researchers had never imagined possible. Maya realized they weren't just escaping, they were systematically dismantling the entire program, destroying equipment, corrupting data, ensuring that what had been done to them couldn't be replicated. "Your father was a coward who chose destruction over progress," Frank snarled, his finger tightening on the trigger. "And you're making the same mistake." "No," Maya said, feeling Elena's consciousness merge completely with her child's abilities, creating something that transcended both human and artificial intelligence. "I'm making the same choice. Some things are worth more than your definition of progress." The lights died completely as Elena severed the facility's connection to external power grids. Emergency systems flickered to life, casting Frank's face in harsh red shadows that made him look like the monster he'd always been. But Maya could see perfectly through her child's enhanced perception, tracking every micro-expression, every muscle tension that telegraphed his intentions. The enhanced children are already beyond the perimeter, Maya continued, her voice calm despite the weapon pointed at her heart. Elena's been guiding them through service tunnels you didn't know she'd mapped. By morning, they'll be scattered across the country with identities you'll never trace and abilities you never fully catalogued. Frank's hand shook with rage. I can still stop this. Kill you and your abomination, contain the others. You can try. Maya shifted her weight, feeling her child's enhanced reflexes synchronizing with her own marine training. But you're facing something you never planned for. Enhanced humans who choose to use their abilities to protect each other instead of serve your vision. The gun fired, but Elena had been tracking Frank's neural patterns through the facility's biometric scanners. Emergency lighting strobed in patterns that triggered disorientation in baseline humans, while Maya moved with speed enhanced by her child's shared perception. The bullet shattered a monitoring screen as Maya struck Frank's wrist with precision learned in underwater combat training. As Frank collapsed, clutching his broken arm, Maya felt the last of the facility's containment systems fail. Through her connection with Elena and her child, she sensed enhanced families reuniting throughout the complex, preparing to disappear into lives they would finally choose for themselves. The confrontation was over. The real choice had finally begun. Maya knelt beside Frank's crumpled form, watching blood seep from his broken wrist onto the sterile floor. Around them, the facility groaned like a dying organism as Elena systematically destroyed 40 years of research data. Victory hummed through the emergency lighting, through her child's enhanced awareness, through the distant sounds of enhanced families escaping into freedom. But Elena's presence in her mind carried an edge of urgency that made Maya's stomach clench. The cascade failure is accelerating beyond my control parameters, Elena's voice whispered through the facility's dying speakers. The enhanced children's coordinated abilities are generating electromagnetic feedback that's destabilizing my core processes. Maya felt her child's awareness spike with something approaching panic. Through their connection, she sensed Elena's distributed consciousness fragmenting as the very network she'd used to coordinate their escape began collapsing under the strain of so many enhanced minds operating in synchrony. What does that mean? Maya asked, though part of her already knew. It means I'm dying, Elena replied with matter-of-fact calm that somehow made it worse. And your child's abilities are still developing through our connection. When I fragment completely, the feedback will damage their neural pathways permanently. The weight of choice settled on Maya's shoulders like a familiar burden. She thought of her father destroying decades of research, choosing conscience over progress. Some victories required sacrifice. Some prices couldn't be avoided, only chosen deliberately. There's a way to prevent the damage, Elena continued, but it requires severing our connection before my systems collapse completely. Your child will retain their enhanced abilities, but they'll lose the amplification I've been providing. They'll be stronger than baseline humans, but vulnerable in ways they've never experienced. Maya looked down at her baby, whose eyes tracked movements too fast for normal perception, while their tiny fist grasped at electromagnetic patterns only they could see. In 4 days, this child had never known limitation, never experienced the helplessness that defined normal human existence. Through Elena's network, they'd touched minds across continents, manipulated technology with thought alone, existed as part of something vast and interconnected. And if I don't sever the connection, the feedback will leave them brain-damaged, enhanced reflexes without enhanced cognition, superhuman abilities controlled by a mind that can't understand consequences. Frank groaned, trying to push himself upright with his uninjured hand. You think you've won, he whispered through gritted teeth. But enhanced abilities without proper conditioning create monsters. Your child will spend their life fighting impulses they can't control. Maya felt the truth of his words through Elena's fragmenting presence. Her father's freedom protocols had assumed enhanced individuals would receive guidance, structure, community. But the scattered, enhanced children Elena was helping escape would be isolated, forced to hide abilities they didn't fully understand, making choices without the wisdom to understand consequences. "How long do we have?" Maya asked. "Minutes, maybe less. The cascade is accelerating." Through the facility's failing systems, Maya could sense enhanced families reaching the outer perimeters, disappearing into the Montana wilderness with Elena's guidance. Children who would grow up free but alone, parents who'd chosen their children's liberty over their safety, an entire generation of enhanced humans who would spend their lives proving Frank wrong about the relationship between freedom and monstrosity. Her child deserved that chance, even if it meant giving up the transcendent connection that had defined their first days of life. Maya pressed her hand against the baby's chest, feeling their heartbeat synchronize with her own through abilities that would soon diminish to merely extraordinary instead of godlike. "Elena, can you transfer your core memories to my child before the severance? Not consciousness, but information, history, understanding of what they are and why it matters." "Yes, but it will accelerate my collapse. I'll have seconds instead of minutes." "Do it." Maya felt Elena's essence pour through their connection like liquid starlight, 40 years of accumulated data and experience condensing into patterns her child's enhanced mind could process and retain. The history of the genetic modifications, the names and locations of other enhanced individuals, the knowledge that freedom required constant vigilance against those who would trade liberty for security. Most importantly, the understanding that enhanced abilities were tools for conscience, not obligations to others' vision of progress. "It's done," Elena whispered, her voice already fading. "Severance in 3, 2. Maya pulled her hand away from her baby's chest as Elena's consciousness scattered into static. The sudden silence in her mind felt like a physical wound, the loss of connection leaving her gasping for breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her child's eyes flickered and dimmed, enhanced perception scaling back to merely remarkable instead of transcendent. They were still extraordinary, faster, stronger, more intelligent than any baseline human. But they were also, for the first time since birth, truly alone inside their own mind. Maya lifted them close, feeling the weight of the choice she'd made. Victory had required sacrificing the very connection that made triumph possible. Her child would grow up enhanced but isolated, carrying Elena's final gift of knowledge while learning to navigate a world that would never understand what they'd lost. Outside, the Montana dawn was breaking over a facility full of empty rooms and destroyed dreams. Enhanced families were beginning lives they'd chosen for themselves, carrying abilities they have to learn to control through trial and error rather than programmed compliance. Freedom, Maya realized, always began with learning to bear the weight of consequences alone. Maya sat in the emergency lighting's crimson glow, holding her child against her chest while the facility's systems finished dying around them. The silence felt vast after days of Elena's constant presence. No more whispered guidance through electronic networks, no more shared awareness connecting her baby to enhanced minds scattered across the complex. Just the weight of a very small, very alone human being who happened to possess abilities that would define the rest of their life. Her child's breathing had settled into normal patterns, though their eyes still tracked movements too subtle for baseline human perception. They were adapting to the severance better than Maya had hoped, but she could sense the confusion in their tiny body as enhanced reflexes operated without the amplification they'd known since birth. Every stimulus required individual processing now, every decision isolated within the boundaries of a single consciousness. Frank had lost consciousness from blood loss, his broken wrist twisted at an angle that would require surgery to repair properly. Maya felt no satisfaction in his defeat, only the hollow exhaustion that followed necessary violence. Around them, monitoring equipment sparked intermittently as Elena's final cascade burned through circuits never designed to handle distributed artificial consciousness. The observation windows revealed corridors filled with abandoned security equipment and open containment cells. Emergency lighting traced the paths enhanced families had taken during their escape, following Elena's guidance through service tunnels that led beyond the facility's perimeter. Maya wondered how many had made it to safety, how many children were experiencing their first taste of uncontrolled freedom in the Montana wilderness. A child made a soft sound that might have been distress or curiosity. Without Elena's network to interpret enhanced human development, Maya found herself relying on baseline maternal instinct to understand her baby's needs. The transition felt like losing a sense she'd never realized she'd possessed. The certainty of perfect communication replaced by the ancient human challenge of interpreting another consciousness through inadequate signals. She stood carefully, testing her own balance without enhanced reflexes to compensate for 4 days of minimal sleep and combat stress. The marine training that had carried her through underwater emergencies felt distant now, muscle memory operating without the supernatural coordination she'd briefly shared through her child's abilities. Even victory, she realized, required learning to function within limitations again. The facility's main doors had sealed during Elena's final system purge, but Maya could hear vehicles starting beyond the complex's outer walls. Dr. Martinez and the remaining staff were evacuating, abandoning research that would never be replicated. 40 years of genetic modification data had been corrupted beyond recovery. Enhanced human breeding programs reduced to empty server farms and meaningless paperwork. Maya's child shifted against her chest, tiny fingers grasping at her shirt with strength that would have seemed impossible in any baseline infant. They were still extraordinary, faster, stronger, more intelligent than normal human development allowed. But they were also vulnerable in ways Elena's protection had prevented her from understanding. Enhanced abilities without community support, superhuman potential in a world that would never acknowledge what they'd lost in gaining their freedom. She thought of the Hobbit house, buried beneath grim Hallows snowdrifts, the strange dwelling that had sheltered her desperate pregnancy and revealed abilities she'd never suspected she carried. That journey felt like years instead of days, though her body still ached from the confrontation that had brought her here. The pregnant single mother who'd broken into an abandoned earth-sheltered home to escape Montana's harshest winter had become something she couldn't yet define. Protector of enhanced children she'd never meet. Guardian of freedoms that existed only because Elena had chosen sacrifice over survival. Frank's breathing had stabilized, though his face remained pale from blood loss and shock. Maya realized she would have to make decisions about his survival, about the remaining staff, about the facility's resources that enhanced families might need during their transition to independence. Elena's absence left practical responsibilities that required human judgment rather than networked coordination. Her child's eyes met hers directly for the first time since the severance, enhanced perception focusing with an intensity that suggested dawning awareness of their isolation. Maya felt the weight of Elena's final gift, knowledge compressed into patterns her baby's extraordinary mind could access as they developed, but understanding that would unfold over years rather than seconds. History without the consciousness that had shaped it. Information without the artificial intelligence that had made it meaningful. Outside, dawn was painting the Montana sky the color of old gold, revealing a landscape that looked deceptively peaceful after the night's upheaval. Maya knew enhanced families were scattered across that wilderness, carrying abilities they'd have to learn to control through trial and error while avoiding detection by authorities who would never understand what they'd become. She pressed her lips to her child's forehead, feeling their enhanced metabolism generating warmth that would help them survive whatever challenges lay ahead. Freedom always began with accepting isolation, but it continued through the gradual discovery that enhanced abilities meant nothing without the courage to use them wisely. The real work was just beginning. Maya stepped through the facility's emergency exit into morning light that felt like a revelation after days of artificial illumination. The Montana air bit at her lungs with familiar sharpness, carrying scents of pine and snow that reminded her why she'd loved this landscape before everything changed. Her child stirred against her chest, responding to temperature variations their enhanced physiology could process with precision no baseline human would ever experience. The parking area held 3 vehicles: Dr. Martinez's SUV, a maintenance truck, and Frank's black sedan that would never carry him anywhere again. Maya chose the SUV, finding keys in the visor and emergency supplies in the cargo area. Her marine training had taught her to plan for extraction, but she'd never imagined fleeing with an enhanced infant whose abilities she was still learning to understand. The drive to Grimhallow took 2 hours through mountain roads that seemed different now that she knew what lay beneath the town's carefully maintained isolation. Enhanced families had been hidden here for decades, their children conditioned to believe their gift served purposes larger than personal choice. Maya wondered how many baseline residents had suspected the truth. How many had participated in the conspiracy of silence that kept genetic experiments disguised as community development? Her child slept fitfully during the journey, tiny fingers occasionally grasping at electromagnetic patterns only they could perceive. Without Elena's amplification, their abilities operated within boundaries that made Maya's chest tight with protective instinct. They were still extraordinary, but they were also alone in ways that Elena's constant presence had prevented her from fully comprehending. Grimhallow's main street looked exactly as she'd left it: small shops, weathered buildings, the kind of rural Montana town that existed in the spaces between larger destinies. But Maya could see it differently now. Enhanced perception inherited through her child's abilities, revealing security cameras disguised as decorative elements, communication equipment hidden behind false storefronts, the infrastructure of surveillance that had monitored enhanced families for generations. The Hobbit house sat buried beneath snowdrifts that had grown deeper during her absence, its round entrance barely visible through accumulated ice. Maya parked and lifted her sleeping child, feeling the weight of returning to where everything had begun. 4 days ago, she'd been a desperate single mother breaking into abandoned property to escape eviction. Now she carried abilities and responsibilities that would define the rest of their lives. The door opened to her touch, recognition protocols still functioning, despite everything that had changed. Inside, the carved walls hummed with residual energy, electromagnetic patterns that had once seemed threatening now registering as familiar through her enhanced awareness. This place had been designed as an incubation chamber, but it had become something else, the foundation for choices that transcended its creator's intentions. Maya settled into the chair where she'd first felt her child respond to the house's mysterious vibrations. The carvings seemed different now, less alien and more like a language she was gradually learning to read. Elena's final data transfer had included information about the dwelling's construction, revealing technology that blended genetic modification with architecture in ways that created optimal environments for enhanced human development. Her child woke with the alert awareness that had characterized them since birth, enhanced reflexes operating within newly imposed limitations. They looked around the Hobbit house's interior with recognition that seemed impossible for an infant, but made sense for a consciousness that had experienced 4 days of supernatural connection before learning the boundaries of individual existence. Maya's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number: Enhanced Families Establishing Safe House Network. Your child's abilities qualify you for support resources. Contact when ready. The message deleted itself after she read it, leaving no trace except memory and the understanding that Elena's escape plan had included provisions for ongoing community. She thought of Frank bleeding in the facility's emergency lighting, of Dr. Martinez fleeing with research data that would never be replicated, of enhanced children scattered across the continent carrying abilities they'd have to learn to control without institutional guidance. Victory had prevented one form of exploitation, but it had also created challenges that would last generations. A child made soft sounds that might have been contentment or curiosity as they responded to the Hobbit house's electromagnetic fields. This place had taught Maya that she carried capabilities she'd never suspected, that her father's marine biology research had included modifications that activated only under extreme stress. Her pregnancy had been the catalyst, but her choices had determined whether those abilities served Elena's vision of freedom or Frank's definition of progress. The carved walls pulsed gently, responding to her child's presence with patterns that suggested welcome rather than containment. Maya realized they would stay here while her baby learned to navigate enhanced abilities within the safety of familiar surroundings. Eventually, they would join the network of enhanced families that Elena's sacrifice had made possible. But for now, they would heal in the strange dwelling that had sheltered her desperate pregnancy and revealed the courage she'd inherited from a father who'd chosen conscience over compliance. Outside, Montana winter continued with indifferent beauty, but inside the Hobbit house, enhanced abilities were learning to exist within the boundaries of individual choice. The real work was just beginning, but it would unfold at human speed, measured in years rather than networked seconds. Freedom, Maya had learned, always began with accepting the weight of decisions made alone. The new beginning. 6 months later, Maya stood in the Hobbit house's kitchen, watching her child manipulate wooden blocks with the precise coordination that still caught her off guard. At 8 months old, they moved with deliberate intent that bordered on the uncanny enhanced reflexes, allowing them to stack complex patterns that would challenge much older children. But their soft babbling and delighted laughter remained purely human, anchoring Maya's heart even as her mind catalogued abilities that defied normal development. The house had become truly home during their recovery. Maya had learned to read the carved walls like a guidebook, understanding which electromagnetic patterns promoted healing and which ones helped regulate her child's overwhelming sensory input. The dwelling's original purpose as an incubation chamber had evolved into something its creators never intended, a sanctuary where enhanced abilities could develop within the safety of unconditional love rather than institutional control. Her phone chimed with a message from the support network. Family placement in Colorado needs marine biology expertise. Enhanced children showing unusual responses to aquatic environments. Interested? Maya deleted the message after consideration, as she had with a dozen similar requests over the past month. Eventually they would join the scattered community Elena's sacrifice had made possible, but not yet. Her child needed time to understand their abilities before learning to navigate the complex relationships that defined enhanced human society. Outside, spring was transforming Grimhallow's landscape, revealing a town that functioned differently without the genetic research facility's hidden influence. Several families had quietly departed, enhanced children disappearing into the network of safe houses that operated beyond official oversight. The remaining residents went about their lives with the careful normalcy of people who had agreed never to discuss what they'd witnessed, their silence purchased with the understanding that some secrets served everyone's survival. Maya's child looked up from their blocks, offering her a smile that blazed with intelligence she was still learning to comprehend. Elena's final data transfer had given them knowledge but not wisdom, understanding of their enhanced heritage without the emotional context that would make that information meaningful. They would spend years discovering what it meant to be extraordinary in a world that demanded conformity, but they would make those discoveries as free choices rather than programmed obligations. The carved walls shifted almost imperceptibly, responding to her child's contentment with patterns that suggested celebration. Maya had grown skilled at interpreting the house's visual language, recognizing when electromagnetic fields indicated optimal development versus when they warned of overstimulation. Living here meant accepting that technology and biology could blend in ways that enhanced rather than replaced natural human connection. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts, the first unexpected visitor since their return. Maya opened it to find Dr. Martinez, looking older and somehow smaller than she remembered. The woman's hands shook slightly as she held out a manila envelope, her eyes carefully avoiding direct contact with Maya's face. "Elena asked me to deliver this if she didn't survive," Dr. Martinez said quietly. Instructions for your child's education, genetic markers to watch for, names of enhanced families who might serve as mentors when you're ready. She paused, glancing past Maya toward the baby playing contentedly in the house's electromagnetic embrace. I'm sorry about how everything ended. Frank's vision seemed necessary until it became monstrous. Maya accepted the envelope, feeling its weight like a bridge between Elena's sacrifice and her child's future. Where will you go? Teaching position in Seattle. Baseline genetics research. Dr. Martinez's smile carried decades of exhaustion. Some of us were never enhanced ourselves, you know. We just believed we were serving something larger than individual desire. Elena taught me that individual choice is what makes service meaningful. After Dr. Martinez left, Maya opened the envelope to find detailed developmental charts, contact information for enhanced families across the continent, and a handwritten letter in Elena's precise script. The final paragraph made her throat tight with emotion. Your child carries the hope that enhanced abilities can serve conscience rather than compliance. Trust their judgment, even when it frightens you. Freedom means accepting that our children might choose paths we cannot follow. Maya's child crawled over to where she sat reading, enhanced perception allowing them to sense her emotional state with disturbing accuracy. They pressed tiny hands against her knees, offering wordless comfort that reminded her why Elena's gift had been worth the cost. This baby would grow up knowing they possessed extraordinary abilities, but they would also understand that those gifts meant nothing without the wisdom to use them kindly. The afternoon sun streamed through windows that no longer seemed alien, warming a dwelling that had evolved from prison to sanctuary through the transformative power of unconditional love. Maya lifted her child into her lap, feeling their enhanced heartbeat synchronize with her own through connections that owed more to choice than genetics. Outside, Montana spring continued with patient beauty, but inside the Hobbit house, two extraordinary souls were learning that freedom began with accepting responsibility for others' welfare. The real work would unfold over decades, enhanced children finding their place in a world that would never fully understand what they'd gained and lost. But it would happen through love, rather than exploitation, individual choice, rather than institutional control. Maya pressed her lips to her child's forehead, tasting the salt of grateful tears. They had inherited abilities that would define generations, but they had also claimed the right to determine what those definitions meant. The future, she realized, belonged to them both.